From the campus of Weber State University in Ogden, the Utah Debate Commission welcomes you to the first Congressional District Candidates Debate.
And good evening. I'm Ken Verdoya, and I'm honored to accept the invitation of the Utah Debate Commission to moderate the first exchange in their schedule for the 2014 election season. We are live on the campus of Weber State University in Ogden for a debate between candidates in Utah's 1st Congressional District. Tonight, we will hear from the incumbent, Republican Representative Rob Bishop, and his Democratic challenger, Donna McAleer. Each candidate receives a 2-minute opportunity for an opening statement, and prior to airtime, it was determined that Donna McAleer would have the first opportunity.
I'm Donna McAleer, and I'm running to represent you, the people of Utah. When I was 17, I made a decision to serve our country. I applied and graduated from West Point, was commissioned in the Army, and stationed overseas in Germany. For me, it was a simple decision. I believe in the freedoms we share and the opportunities afforded to us all, and I'm dedicated to preserving those freedoms and opportunities. The ideals of integrity, service, and commitment to a mission guide me here today. Having led a global division of a technology company and created jobs in the supply chain, turned around a Utah healthcare organization, served on various not-for-profit boards, and volunteering at my daughter's elementary school, I understand the importance of community and its impact on us. I've actually had to work with other people developing results that help a community. And given the present gridlock in Congress, we need people who know how to work together and deliver results. I've traveled throughout Utah, and I've listened to your concerns. You've told me Utahns are angry with Congress. You're tired of the gridlock and polarization. You want Congress to do its job, get things done for you. That's the work I will do. We need leaders who will not pull political stunts and take money out of people's pockets and throw them out of work. Voting to shut down the government for 16 days last fall was wrong. It was a political stunt that hurt our state and our country, costing Utah $30 million and furloughing 40,000 workers. Congressman Bishop helped manipulate the rules to keep the government shutdown going and voted against the bipartisan compromise that would have ended it. He believes our biggest fight is against the federal government. Our biggest fight is strengthening our economy and improving our schools. I will work with you and everybody. I will be accountable to you. I'm Donna McAleer. Together we can work together to fix Congress, stop the political gamesmanship, and move Utah forward.
And now a 2-minute opportunity for Representative Rob Bishop.
Hey, thank you. I'm Rob Bishop, the congressman in the 1st District. I live with my wife in Brigham City, where we raised 5 kids and have 6 grandkids. I've lived my entire life in northern Utah because I like Utah and I'm proud to be a resident of this state. I served in the legislature, where I retired as Speaker of the House and learned to dislike federal mandates coming down on state government. I also served 28 years as a public school teacher, where I realized the importance of local control on education. But more importantly, when you put 5 kids on missions and through college on a school teacher's salary, I learned something about what it takes to be frugal at the same time. So as much as I appreciate the invitation to be here, this election is really not about me. It's not about the Democrat candidates. It's not about the candidates who were not invited to participate. It's about you. This is still your Congress. It is your government. It is your future. It will be your opportunity to decide who has the principles and the experience to best represent you in Congress. When I go back to Washington, there are certain false narratives that actually exist back there. One is that only a Washington bureaucrat has the vision to know what is right for this country. If there's ever a conflict between a local government official and a Washington bureaucrat, obviously Washington has to win, and that the West needs to be protected from itself. I despise and deny all of those narratives, and I have appreciated your willingness to send me back there and put me in a position where I can do something about it. I'm not flashy. I'm not a show horse. I'm a workhorse that actually tries to accomplish things, and not to consolidate power in Washington, but move that power back to local and state governments and to the people so that you have more options, more choices, and more control in your lives. That is what I have tried to do in the past, and that is the goal I still have for the future. I appreciate the opportunity of being here with you.
Thank you, Representative. The Utah Debate Commission has established a format that allows each candidate 90 seconds for an initial response to a question. Now, these questions were drawn from voter input to the Utah Debate Commission website. More about that in a minute, but first, our first question will go initially to Representative Bishop and then Donna McAleer responding in kind. As we meet on this Tuesday, Americans are receiving reports of coordinated military strikes in Syria led by the United States aimed at the forces of the Islamic State, known variously as ISIS or ISIL. For the preliminary indications of success, most military analysts believe an air war cannot resolve the conflict with ISIS. Tell me what you would support as policy toward ISIS. And where and how would you draw the line in military action? Representative Bishop, the first opportunity.
The threat that is given by ISIS is real. The terrorists are evil. They have threatened Americans. They have acted against Americans. They threaten America and our allies, especially in Europe. So sitting back and doing nothing is not an option. Allowing them simply to have free reign in the Middle East so they can plan attacks on us is simply not an option. As we're going through this, there are several concepts that we should have. One is the fact that there were airstrikes today. For the first time, F-22s were used, and they were used successfully in battle and combat, and I just wish this administration had not cut the number of F-22s that were produced and actually given the Air Force what it really wanted in that. If we are to go into battle, we have to make sure that the men and women who are actually fighting those things have the infrastructure and have the supplies they need to be successful. If we go into battle, then it is important that we as a government, first of all, state our objectives very clearly, which is something I wish the Congress and the President still has to do, and then also turn it over to the military for the most effective way of actually fulfilling that concept and going forward. What happens in the future will depend on what we need to happen in the future, but the fact that we have taken it to this terrorist group is something that is appropriate and needs to be done, or it will come over here.
Donna McAleer, your initial 90-second opportunity.
Thank you so much. So, yes, to our brave servicemen and women conducting those airstrikes. The first thing I would have done was stayed in Washington and actually had a full debate and discussion about this topic. When we commit any kind of forces, we need to thoroughly understand both the short-term and the long-term strategic objectives. I was actually in D.C. last week at a federal committee meeting of the Defense Advisory Council on Women in the Service. And yes, your Congress did take a vote, but they got out of town pretty quickly before understanding all the impacts. The answer in Syria and the Middle East is not a U.S. military one. It has to be a political one. One of the benefits of what happened today was that it is part of a broad coalition, including 5 Arab countries who are predominantly Sunni. However, we know our air power is far superior. So their involvement was important from a legitimacy and a credibility standpoint, but we don't exactly know what they've actually done. Syria will be a complicated area. We have an ongoing civil war there with a government we don't support, a veritable Star Wars bar scene of anti-government groups that change leadership daily. We have unfamiliar territory, a culture, and religion, and an international community that wants action but is slow to move. We should be debating this topic thoroughly. One of Congress's most sacred jobs is to make a decision of whether or not we send our military into action.
Now, the format allows for rebuttal time for each candidate or the discretion of the moderator to offer a follow-up question in the same 30-second period. And so I'll exercise my discretion right off the bat by saying the most repeated phrase in this political season when it comes to the military seems to be no boots on the ground. Neither one of you addressed that concept in your response. Tell me how boots on the ground, troops affecting land actions, is or is not a part of your consideration of ISIS. Representative Bishop, the first 30 seconds.
That decision is not one for a politician to make. It's one for our military generals to make on what is necessary to be successful once we have identified what the target is supposed to be. Congress did debate for 2.5 days this particular process, and the resolution was passed was one that was worked out by leaders of both the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats. The direct answer to your question can't be given now. It's going to be done when we assess what the situation is and what is necessary. But nothing should be ruled out prematurely.
Donna McAleer, your opportunity.
We've seen from more than 12 years of war in the Middle East that air power alone is not enough. However, before ever committing our servicemen and women in any country, we need to fully understand what we're trying to accomplish, what the objective is, and what the exit strategy is. And that advice comes from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and his chiefs. There's no way to answer that question now. A much longer debate and discussion is required before we commit our troops in harm's way. But our military should always be the third use tool in national policy, not the first and not the second.
Donna McAleer, you'll have a first opportunity to respond to this next question that came once again from the voting public. A substantial portion of the land in Utah, over 60%, is owned by the federal government. State legislators in Utah passed a bill calling for the transfer of millions of acres of public lands to the state. Opponents of the bill say turning public land over to the state will result in mismanagement. Who should properly control the now federal lands in our state? Your first 90-second opportunity.
Well, as we all know, Utah is home and blessed with some of the most spectacular land and landscape in the world. Visitors come from around the globe. Our national parks and natural resources generated over more than 9.5 million visitors, bringing more than $600 million of revenue into this state. It's a historical fallacy and myth to think that these lands were owned by Utah. They never were. And so when we have a debate about this, we really have to start from understanding the law and the policy. These lands in the Enabling Act were given to the federal government, and Utah forever disclaimed the right to those lands. So when we hear language like taking back the federal land, suing the federal government for control of the public land, it is a historical fallacy, and we need to begin that discussion with an understanding of the law and the policy. Remember, our outdoor recreation industry and travel and tourism is one of the largest drivers of our economy in this state. And we need good policies to manage and protect and steward that land for future generations and our children's generations and my daughter's children.
Thank you, Donna McAleer. Representative Bishop, your opportunity to respond to public lands.
Look, Utah is a public land state, always has been, always will be. The issue is not whether we should be a public land state. The issue is simply who is going to make the decisions on how those public lands are used. And that should be the people who live in the area where those public lands are. Those are Utahns who should make those decisions. And anyone who would say that Utahns are not competent to make those decisions is simply whistling in the dark. That is not the way it was supposed to be. The Enabling Act that was just mentioned was an enabling act that was common language in almost every enabling act for every state except for the original 13 that entered this nation. So it's the same language North Dakota had and Nebraska had and Alabama and Florida when they were given their lands back from the federal government, because it was language that was there as a quit deed concept because the federal government sold those lands to make money. The West was not treated the same way that the Midwest and the South was treated, with the exact same verbiage in our Enabling Act. So the idea that Utah should make control, make decisions of this, is perfectly legitimate. And Utahns are competent to do it, and they should be empowered to do that. And I support that. It's not an issue of whether we have public lands. It's an issue of who actually decides, someone who lives here or someone who lives back in Washington. I choose the person who lives here.
Donna McAleer, your 30-second opportunity for rebuttal.
So again, those public lands are not owned by Utahns. They're owned by people in Des Moines, Iowa, in Boston, Massachusetts, and Tallahassee, Florida. They're owned by the 314 million Americans. And it's because of how these lands were divided, and it's because of things like the President Roosevelt's Antiquities Act that many of these lands have been protected. Again, we derive more than $600 million in revenue and in tourists coming to this state, as well as a thriving outdoor product industry.
I remind all of the candidates to be mindful of the clock that is displayed before them, indicating their allotted time. Representative Bishop, you have 30 seconds.
Look, it is still the same concept that these lands should be controlled by those who understand what they are doing. And the state of Utah is far more competent in managing these lands. We have shown in our subcommittee how state forests in Washington and Idaho are far more productive than federal forests that are abutting the state lands. We've also shown like Goblin Valley in Utah is a perfect place that would be an ideal destination spot. Currently, the area around it is controlled by the BLM. They walk in there once every 3 months. It should be given to the state so they can make it a destination spot. They can do a better job. Thank you.
Representative Rob Bishop has the first 90-second opportunity on our next subject, which shifts gears a bit. A group of politicians as diverse as President Obama, Texas Governor Rick Perry, and Republican Speaker of the House John Boehner, and others, have publicly stated America's immigration system is broken. What do you see as the major breaks in that system, and how do you propose a fix? Representative Bishop?
You know, in every time I have a town hall meeting, and I've had many of them, almost always the first question is about our immigration system. And the one thing I found out that permeates all those discussions is there is a great deal of anger and anxiety that is out there. And if we are going to come up with a solution, we have to, first of all, lower that anger and lower that anxiety level. And there's only one way of doing that, and that is being able to say we actually do have secure borders. If you do that, then that anxiety goes down, and you can move on to the other areas, which are visas, which are low-hanging fruit. Almost everyone agrees with that, and individual standalone bills have passed the House on all these issues. We can actually reach consensus to solve almost all of the problems if we realize the first thing you have to do is guarantee and look the people in the eye and really mean it that the borders are secure. And then go on to the next step, which is how we reform our visa system, the E-Verify system, those types of things. And other issues that may be divisive, wait on those until you can actually get more uniformity coming through. If we try to do an omnibus bill, as the Senate did, it's going to fail because you bring something that everyone hates. If you actually take this in a step-by-step pattern, so you build consensus along the way, we can come up with not just a solution to our immigration issue, we can come up with a good solution to our immigration system. I'm confident that Congress will eventually do that, and sooner rather than later.
Donna McAleer, your opportunity on the subject of an immigration system. Is it broken, and how might it be fixed?
Our immigration system is broke, and the inaction by Congress is unacceptable. Yes, we need to secure our borders, but we also need to deal with the estimated 12 million undocumented immigrants that are already here. We can't apply Band-Aid solutions, and the American people deserve a bipartisan decision on this, but it has to be debated and discussed in Congress, and Congress refuses to vote on this. I know. My mother and my grandfather fled Hungary in 1944, just before the Soviets entered to liberate the Hungarians from the Nazis. They came to this country through Ellis Island. My brother Marlon is a Filipino immigrant who was a tech sergeant based at Hill Air Force Base, and Allison, my sister, is from Korea, is a home health care aide in Maine. People deserve a path to citizenship, those that want it. Not every undocumented worker who's coming here is coming for citizenship, but they're coming to make a better life. And a great example, Utah has actually been a leader in immigration reform with the Utah Compact that puts people first. And I think this should really serve as a national model where they provide a path to citizenship. It's straightforward and direct. We have a very complicated system. And remember, last summer, the Senate voted on a bill that addressed many of these issues. The House has refused to deal with it. We have religious leaders and business leaders calling for immigration reform.
Representative Bishop, your rebuttal opportunity.
Yeah, it's not quite that way. We actually did pass an immigration bill just in the last bill we did in the beginning of August before he came here that dealt with the flood of kids who are coming across the border in Texas. But it also had a security portion to it. It was the bill we had been talking about all the time to try and secure the southern border by making changes in the law that prohibit the Border Patrol from doing their job. They don't need more money. They don't need more manpower. They need simple access. That bill passed on a bipartisan vote in the House. It's a good bill. It would help solve that particular problem and would help solve other problems in the future, but it's one of the 350-plus bills still sitting on Harry Reid's desk that the Senate needs to consider and the Senate needs to debate on it. It's a good bill. It's much better than the Senate bill.
Donna McAleer, your 30-second opportunity.
Well, the children coming across the border, this is not about border security. They're surrendering at the border. They're escaping violent-ridden countries. They're escaping death. They're escaping rape. They're escaping harm. We need to deal with this as a humanitarian crisis. At the same time, we need immigration reform, and we need it passed at the federal level. Immigration is a federal issue. We need border security, and we need a clear path to citizenship because our economy Every end of our economy depends on having the best workers available.
Donna McAleer, you get the first opportunity to respond to this next question, and it was so lengthy when it came in from a voter, I am a little bit reluctant to read the entire length of the question. But there are 3 key words that sum it up, and I'd like your reaction to those 3 key words, whether it's working, whether it's not working, and what the future might be. Those 3 words are Affordable Care Act. You have the first 90-second opportunity.
So thank you so much. I believe the Affordable Care Act needs to be fixed and improved. There are some really great provisions of this, and I understand it. Having turned around a healthcare not-for-profit that served 25,000 residents of 2 counties, access to affordable health care is an economic issue. But the things that are great about the Affordable Care Act is nobody can be denied health care because of a pre-existing condition. What's really important in this state is young people under 26 can stay on their parents' policies. And something I'm very concerned about is women will not be charged more just because they're women. So instead of voting to shut down the government or voting 51 times to repeal a law that is on the books, that went through the process as defined in our Constitution, it was brought up on the House, debated and discussed. It was passed and it moved to the Senate. The same thing happened. It was signed by the president. The Supreme Court upheld it and a president was reelected. We need to sit down and find common ground, not throw up our hands, not vote 51 times to repeal a law. We need to work to fix it. Healthcare is an economic issue. It affects every single one of us. And if we don't think it does, anybody who has health insurance, their premiums go up because people without insurance have a tendency to go to the emergency room, which is at the highest cost point in the chain.
Representative Bishop, your 90-second opportunity on the theme of Affordable Care Act.
Okay, Affordable Care Act or Obamacare does need to be fixed. That's why there have already been 7 bills that have passed the House and the Senate to change portions of it, and that's why the President refuses to enforce certain elements of it, because it is unsustainable and just flat out doesn't work. Stephen Shattuck had a much better version, a much better bill that should have been discussed on the House floor, but Speaker Pelosi would not allow that. Actually, right now, Dr. Price and Dr. Rowe, who are 2 members of the House, have 2 bills that are very good solutions and alternatives that would have many of the things that are popular would be maintained. It's even like being able to be on your family's insurance until you're 20. Utah has always had that for years. You don't need the federal government to tell us. That's what we were doing before this ever came about. Bottom line is very simple. The Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, is not sustainable. It will not be sustainable in the future. There has to be changes to it. And the question will be, what will those changes be? There are some people that want to move it directly, much more to the left, and have a single standard payer. There are those that want to put more free market enterprise elements within it. That's going to be the debate of the future. What direction will we do? Obviously, it's not going to be repealed in the next 2 years. But at some time, we have to do something, because the track that this act is on right now cannot be financially sustained in the future. Something has to change. It was too early for prime time. It was passed too quickly, with actually less debate than we did on the resolution for ISIS. It was passed too quickly, and it needs to be changed, and how we change that is significant.
Donna McAleer, your rebuttal opportunity.
So again, when it was passed, the Congressional Budget Office reviewed the ACA, and it said it would reduce federal expenditures by $48 billion over a 10-year period, even after projected administrative costs. So opponents of the Affordable Care Act that say it will lead to bigger government are simply misinformed or really not representing the facts. The ACA hasn't even been in effect for a year. We need to look at its output before we start saying that it needs to be repealed. Who are the organizations lobbying for this? Insurance companies. That's who's going to lose out on some of their profit margins. And when you look at how candidates are funding, you needed to look at the insurance companies. That'll tell you who they're voting for.
Representative Bishop, I'm going to give you about 40 seconds for equal time on your rebuttal.
You don't need to do that. I can say this very quickly. The General Accounting Office has changed their estimates. They are now estimating it's going to cost much more. It is much less effective than they originally estimated, and it's not sustainable in the future. We're going to have to make changes whether you like it or not. What those changes are is going to be very significant. I'm done.
Okay, Representative, then you get the next opportunity at the next question.
This one then. All right.
Our next question turns to a subject that you both addressed already in your previous comments. Congress has not been able to tackle many or successfully address many of the problems facing our country because of what the voter identifies as partisan gridlock. What would you do to help eliminate what appears to be a stalemate in our nation? Representative Bishop, you have the first 90-second opportunity.
Yeah, the stoppage in activity in Congress is not really a partisan one. The House is actually passing partisan bills all the time. It's one between the two houses of Congress, which is once again why we have passed over 350 plus bills, 70% of those with bipartisan votes, that still have yet to be taken up, discussed, or doing anything. They're still sitting on Senator Reid's desk. That's where the stoppage actually takes place. I'm actually proud. There was a story that came out recently that said I was the second most successful member of Congress in being able to bring resolutions or issues from the committee to the floor. I appreciate that. And the votes from our Resource Committee and the Armed Services Committee that I brought to the floor have all been passed either by a voice vote or they've been passed with Democrat support going forward. The bills I am still working on in the lame duck session all have Democrat co-sponsors. I really think there's a good deal of effort in the House to actually reach across party lines and get things done. The problem is it's still going to the Senate where the goal seems to be, I'm not really sure what. You know, when I was majority leader in the House and in the legislature in Utah, my job was to make sure the bills were kept going and so work was being done. Harry Reid is the majority leader in the Senate. I really think it's the opposite approach. He's trying not to have bills go forward and not get things done. And it may be a ploy of some kind, but it is very frustrating for us. Stoppage is not partisan. Stoppage is because of the two houses.
Donna McAleer, you have your 90-second opportunity on gridlock.
Well, real leaders take action, and real leaders work together. They don't place the blame on others or the other house. The government shutdown and the dysfunction and the gridlock occur in Congress because we don't hold our elected officials accountable for their work. If any of you in business, any of you in not-for-profit, first of all, you got to show up to work. This Congress was only in session less than 120 days. That's the first thing. Our founding fathers never meant for politics to be the full-time profession of a few. They meant for a representative form of government. They meant for people of diverse backgrounds to come to Washington to debate and discuss. But our House and Senate won't even talk to each other. There's radical thinking on both ends of the spectrum. Here's something really interesting. This is all up to all of you. Every 2 years, we have an opportunity to replace 87% of our federal legislators. 87%. That's all 435 Congresspeople and 33 senators. And what do? We send back 82%, and we expect a different result. Anybody who has studied any kind of history or science knows that's the definition of insanity. So it's time to send real problem solvers, not guardians of gridlock, back to Washington.
Representative Bishop, your rebuttal opportunity.
Look, I don't want to sound like I'm blaming everything on Harry Reid, but I am. In the last 8 years, we have passed 8 budgets. They have passed 1. This year, we have passed 7 of our 12 appropriation bills. They haven't passed any. I'm already assigned to be one of the negotiators on the Defense Authorization Act. The Senate hasn't even picked it up in committee, so we're negotiating with them on amendments they haven't even met yet. And I'm sorry, it's very difficult to actually deal with that. In the House, we are passing things on a bipartisan basis, and we're doing it continuously. They're going over to the Senate, and that's where they're staying. That has to change.
Rebuttal time for you, Donna McAleer.
Well, the bottom line is, we have a Congress that shut down the government for 16 days. It furloughed more than 40,000 people, working families in this state. It cost our state $30 million. I don't think we want this to happen again. But history is a great predictor of future performance. We've had 12 years of Representative Bishop in the House. It's time to give this guardian of gridlock a well-deserved retirement and put somebody in there who's actually had to deliver results.
We have now passed the midpoint of our time tonight. I want to welcome once again our television, radio, and online audiences to this live debate between candidates for the 1st Congressional District. We are, in fact, live on the campus of Weber State University in Ogden, Utah. And this is a landmark event in voter information, with media joining together with the citizen-based initiative to provide statewide debate coverage for Utah's federal and statewide offices. Tonight's questions are drawn from those submitted to the Utah Debate Commission at their website. It's very simple address, Utah Debate Commission, one word, .org. We invite you to be part of the process and provide questions you would like to see taken up at a future debate. Also, the website has the schedule for all future debates and will provide an opportunity for you to watch completed debates on demand. Now, back to our questions, and my record indicates that Donna McAleer will have the first opportunity. Admittedly, this one would seem to be a softball, and since we're in the shadow of the great facility right now, I can't imagine anyone speaking against it. But let's take up Hill Air Force Base. What is its appropriate role as we move into the 21st century? Is it still current for an Air Force base to exist in Utah? Does it serve an important purpose? And how do you sustain that purpose going forward in this 21st century? You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Well, most definitely. Hill Air Force Base is the largest single-site employer in our state. As a matter of fact, we have the 6th largest percentage of federal workers in the state of Utah. Hill Air Force Base plays a vital role in our national security and the effectiveness of our fighting force. So many of those F-22s that were involved in the strikes in Syria, that maintenance is now being done at Hill Air Force Base. That has really strengthened and brought a couple hundred more jobs. As you also know, the controversial F-35, the 1st Squadron, will be based here. Now, interestingly enough, the F-35 squadron, to actually run that squadron, those planes require somewhere between 30 and 45 million lines of code. This is an incredible opportunity for this area because all that software, all that, the skill and the workforce, we've got great institutions like Weber State, Utah State University, and Davis Applied Technology College, which are developing that pipeline. Hill Air Force Base is the only site also in the country that can repair the Minuteman missile. But it's important to understand, in the last couple years, the command of Hill Air Force Base has been downgraded. It's gone from a 2-star to a 1-star position, and all the procurement decisions got removed. Interestingly enough, my former colleague on the Defense Advisory Council for Women is the Secretary of the Air Force, Debbie James. So I've already started developing some of these relationships of Hill. But remember, the Base Alignment and the Base Realignment and Closure Act is not going away.
Representative Bishop, your 90-second opportunity to, if you will, kiss the baby.
You were right. This is a no-brainer. Hill is essential. And it's not just essential for jobs in Utah. It's essential for our military structure, and the Air Force realizes that. The F-22 repair work, there are a lot of politicians that tried to get that to California. The Air Force picked Hill because it is much more efficient and effective. It is the workforce we have here at Hill and the community support that makes it such a prime base and one that the Air Force recognizes. So when they went through the process of bedding down the F-35, it was the community support that solidified Hill as the first choice for that. There are too many things, and Donna went through a lot of those things that take place. It means it's really a purple base. There are too many different kinds of activities just to pick it up and move it somewhere else. That would not be cost effective. But what is the cool part is the fact that it is the workforce here that makes it such a prime base, and the Air Force recognizes that, and they've done it everywhere. Now, it is true that we have downgraded the base from a 2-star to a 1-star, and I have to admit that I was opposed to that and fought it. And I also have to admit I was wrong. The way we reorganized that with having General Litchfield as a 3-star in Oklahoma has actually improved all 3 of the depots and made our efforts much better and puts him on an equal playing field with the other branches of the service when it goes to negotiations. So I was wrong in objecting to that downgrade. That downgrade has actually been a plus for Hill Air Force Base and will move us into the future. Yeah, there will be BRACs at some time. We have outlawed BRACs for this next year. But when that time comes, Hill is in great shape because of the workforce and the community support of Hill.
For those of us at home thinking of what is a BRAC, it's a base realignment and closure, an act of Congress mandating cuts that are then responsible for the military. I'm going to give Donna McAleer the first opportunity to respond in a follow-up, if you will, a rebuttal. The concept of BRAC, is it appropriate for our Defense Department to undergo this type of base and facility review?
Well, as a veteran and former Army officer, we have to constantly look at our military spending. We spend about the fourth amount in the world on military spending. There's a lot of opportunities to reduce spending without affecting troop readiness or troop safety. One of them is, how are we positioned around the world? Are we positioned effectively to meet those threats? The second is in our procurement process. We have a horrendous procurement process there. But Hill Air Force Base, I think it's the one thing Congressman Bishop and I probably agree on, is essential to Utah and essential to our nation.
Representative Bishop, what about the BRAC process? Is it legitimate and an important one for the American people?
Well, you know, I have never heard somebody define BRAC without putting a swear word in front of it, so you miss somewhere. And I obviously won't say what that word is except STEM. So the BRAC process is something that has been used to try and help the military, but one of the studies I've requested of GAO that hasn't come back yet is, what are we actually doing with the land that is taken away from the military? What's happening to it? And most of it is actually being transferred over to other government agencies. So the military may lose some costs and the military may lose some land, but the taxpayers still are keeping it all and are still paying a bill. It's just going to a different department. That, to me, is not a great benefit of BRAC.
Representative Bishop, you'll have the first 90-second opportunity to reply to this very plaintive question that came from apparently a college student regarding the economy. The unemployment rate in the United States has declined from its high point during the recession, but unemployment remains a stubborn challenge for America's lawmakers and for me as a student looking at a career. What can a member of Congress do to address the problem of national unemployment and ensure that unemployment rates do not rise again? Is that an appropriate role for Congress?
It's a role that has been assigned to Congress in recent years and the presidency as well, and it's a legitimate one. Our economy is growing by all indicators, except there's always an undertow of difficult areas that make it questionable whether we really are growing or whether our economy is just stuttering around. It's a problem, and for someone trying to get a job, that becomes even more significant, which, and I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but of those bills still sitting on Harry Reid's desks, over 70 of them deal with jobs, how to create more jobs, how to help the private sector generate more jobs. I really wish the Senate would pick those up and deal with those issues, because that's exactly what we need to move this economy forward and to make sure that our growth in our economy continues on a steady path. The other thing that becomes essential is, you're not going to have economic growth without energy, and without that kind of energy potential. The reason we are growing at a stuttering rate right now is because of all the energy that's being produced on state and private land. If you were to add that with what could be produced on federal land, we could actually have a very strong effort to try and raise that economy. When Ronald Reagan was president, he had to deal with double-digit inflation, double-digit unemployment, double-digit interest rates. He had to figure out what to attack first, and I think it's interesting. The first thing he attacked was energy. He built our energy supply because that was the way you move forward always on the economy, which then took care of inflation and took care of unemployment and the interest rates. That's what we have to do. Those bills are sitting over in the Senate. They should be debated.
Donna McAleer, your 90-second opportunity on, again, considering from the perspective of this plaintive college student saying, what's the future like for me? What can you do in Congress?
Well, job growth is key to any city, any state, and to the nation. And there are several things Congress could do. We know here in Utah, small businesses are the backbone of our economy. More than 83,000 small businesses employ more than 56% of our population. What we need to do is really look at our tax code. We need to close those loopholes that allow huge multinational corporations and large U.S. corporations to pay next to no taxes. We need to look at the tax code for small businesses and look at the burden on those businesses. Why are they bearing such a heavy burden for the tax? So how does the government create jobs? No, it's the private sector that creates jobs. But government can help by reforming the tax code. We could also use some infrastructure spending. Infrastructure, be it the information highway or be it the roads we drive on. That's part of also building our economy. When we have a thriving middle class, our whole economy benefits, and that's where we need to be focusing on. And for that young college student, I would say make sure you finish your college degree. That is important. We have seen over and over people who graduate high school, people who graduate with a technical degree, Every subsequent degree you get, you have a higher earnings potential. We need to stay focused on education.
Representative Bishop, rebuttal opportunity?
Yeah, why not? To the kid who wrote in, I feel for that child or that kid. And it's not a tax code issue. It's not a revenue issue. It's a regulatory issue which stops the growth of jobs. It's an investment issue which stops the growth of jobs. Congress does have a role in that, and we have played that role in that in the future. And it's also a policy issue that comes from the administration as well. We already have companies in Utah that are great companies that are starting to look overseas for their job production because of the policies that we have, the regulatory policies we have. That's where you need to look. That's where the future will be.
Donna McAleer, your 30-second opportunity.
Well, look at the great tax incentives here in this state that bring companies like NV Composites, a high-end bicycle composite manufacturer, right here in Ogden. Because of some of the benefits they were afforded, that company has created more than 150 jobs here and has over $300 million in revenue. So definitely, there are things we can do from a legislative perspective. But again, we have to sit down and be willing to talk about it, find common ground, and deliver results for people.
You will receive the first 90-second opportunity, Donna McAleer, to respond to this next question. Today, Bruce Springsteen turned 65.
Donna McAleer turned 49.
As a person who's 62, I resent that figure. But let's assume that the boss, the iconic American singer-songwriter, is not going to be dependent upon Social Security in retirement. Millions of Americans are. So what will security and other benefits be like as America ages, as the baby boom, such as myself, reaches our gray years? How do we retain its viability? Should we retain its viability? Your first 90-second opportunity.
Well, we have to remember, Social Security is something that people have worked for. It is a benefit that we paid forward. It's part of compensation. It's been earned over a lifetime of work and paychecks. That is something we need to protect. That is important. Many people depend on Social Security. So to talk about cutting it, that's to cut what somebody has already contributed to their retirement. It is not an entitlement. It is a benefit, and we do need to protect that.
Representative Bishop, your 90-second opportunity.
This may be the first time I agree with what Donna has said here today, but yeah, Social Security is something we have promised our elderly, and we need to maintain it. And the nice part about Social Security is, of all the entitlements, that is the easiest one to reform and make solid. All we have to do is change the way we actually invest. We are investing all the Social Security funds in government bonds would come back at a 2% rate, so the government is investing in itself and then charging itself back, and that's silly. If we did the same thing that almost every other retirement program does, whether it be a public one or a private one, and made sure that we had an actuarially sound basis, you could take that money and use it much more efficiently and effectively to help grow the economy, more importantly, to get interest coming back into the account to make it actually sound in the future. To me, Social Security is the easy one to solve because it's simply a matter of how we invest it, and right now we are investing it poorly, and it could be changed. If you go to the other so-called entitlements like Medicaid, Medicare, that becomes a much more difficult approach to it because that one is on a track of destruction. Quite frankly, we cannot work our way just by playing around the edges with that one. There needs to be significant reform. Either you increase the amount of money or you decrease the benefits or you do some significant reform in how it is organized. That one is trickier. That one is more difficult. But Social Security, there is no reason why Social Security cannot be there for everyone in the future. And as someone who's a hell of a lot closer to Social Security than you are, unfortunately not as close as you are, but I care about it too.
I don't see the need for rebuttal on this. If you don't mind, I'd like to move on to the next topic. And this one may produce some disagreement. Every time there's a tragedy involving firearms, we hear calls for greater controls, and we hear pushback against those calls for greater controls. Let me ask you where you believe we are as a nation in terms of the rights to keep and bear arms. Are we good where we are? Do we need to tighten or control ownership? Or do we need to ease existing controls? Representative Bishop, you have the first 90-second opportunity on gun control.
This might be a short answer as well. The Second Amendment is an individual right of self-defense. It's part of the Constitution. It must be respected. The issue at hand is not necessarily, and in fact, if you talk to law enforcement, they're not afraid of the legal guns that are out there or the legal permit holders who are out there. They're afraid of the illegal guns that will get them. If we actually have to do something, we work our efforts at trying to make sure that the illegal activity is curtailed, but without restricting those who are doing things legally and justifiably and correctly. And as I said, the Second Amendment is a constitutional right, and it is an individual right. I'm done.
Donna McAleer, we may come back to you, Representative, but Donna McAleer, it's your opportunity for 90 seconds.
Yes, the Second Amendment is a constitutional right. I carried a gun. I actually carried several. Assault rifles, pistols, you name it. They were part of my tools in the profession of arms. As a military police officer, I packed a lot of heat. But I trained and qualified with them regularly. I know what they're capable of. Assault weapons are designed for one purpose, and one purpose only: killing quickly. High-capacity magazines are manufactured to unleash a barrage of bullets rapidly. Armor-piercing bullets are made to penetrate the protective plates of vehicles and to kill occupants efficiently. The real debate is not about the Second Amendment. It's about real, responsible gun ownership. Why? Because regardless of what side of this issue on, I think we would all agree guns are not toys. So I ask you, would a responsible gun owner give a child a pistol that's loaded with the safety off? Would a responsible gun owner allow a person suffering from mental illness to purchase and own a firearm? Would a responsible gun owner support an individual convicted of a felony, particularly a violent felony, from owning and using a firearm? We need to talk about responsible gun ownership.
Representative Bishop, I'm going to come back and redirect. Is it too easy, too difficult, or just about right to purchase and own a handgun in the United States at the present time?
Look, we have laws everywhere as far as ownership and qualifications for carrying like a concealed weapon here in the state of Utah. The issue comes back to however you want to put the verbiage in here. It comes back to the same issue. The society is not more secure with more restrictive gun laws. And it is an individual right of self-defense. And I'm glad it only was 30 seconds because I only used 25 of that to say that.
Donna McAleer, too easy, too difficult, or just about right to possess a firearm?
I think it's a little too easy. I think we need to have mandatory background checks. I think we need to ban assault rifles and high-capacity magazines. If you want to shoot these things, join the military, join a police force, and be trained on them. What's driving this is the gun lobby. What you have to understand is guns don't have a sunset. They don't go obsolete like our smartphones in 2 years. So gun manufacturers have to come up with new ways to get more people to purchase products. And they do this with new technologies and accessories.
Donna McAleer, you'll have the 90-second first opportunity to respond to this question that comes from along the Wasatch Front. While Utah is one of the most beautiful states in America, there are many times during the year when air quality in cities and towns across Utah is the unhealthiest in the country. What national legislative initiatives, if any, would you propose or support that would help preserve Utah's beauty and protect Utah residents from unhealthy air?
Well, I agree. We live in one of the most beautiful places in the country. And that's one of the reasons I moved here and decided to raise a family here, because of our snow-covered peaks, our towering mountains, and our red rock landscape. But we can't continue to make excuses for the pollution along the Wasatch Front. I hate it every time Utah air is on the front page of the New York Times for having the worst air in the country. We're getting to a ground zero in Vernal, where we have high ozone and high particulate matter. We need regulation because we don't do it ourselves. We need regulation of our food supply. We need regulation on our roads and our Department of Defense. I support the reduction in carbon emissions. It's over a long period of time. We need to be moving to newer, cleaner fuel sources. There are several things that need to happen. We need transportation reform. We need to focus on big industry sources. We've got to get rid of medical incineration like Stericycle. Why is it no other state wanted that plant? There are things we can do, but we've got to demand this from our state and municipal governments as well as from the federal government.
Representative Bishop, your opportunity for 90 seconds on the subject of Utah's air.
Yeah, Utah's air is now and always was and probably forever will be a byproduct of the geography of Utah. The reality is the particulate matter today is lower in Utah than it was when I was growing up. And part of that is because the state of Utah has taken an aggressive role in what they are doing. The state's Department of Environmental Quality are competent and they do a good job. They have passed recent legislation that actually has worked, and it is working. The one thing that would harm that work from taking place is to allow the federal government to come in and preempt it with its own standards, especially when, as I have seen them doing in my county, for example, much of the standards they put on there are arbitrary without much science behind it. One of the things that the federal government really needs to watch in what it's doing is it is impeding the effort of the industry to try and help clean up the environment. Part of that is in what they do. When the federal government comes in and takes over primacy on an area, they start at ground zero, which means if you have a company and you want to actually make it more environmentally friendly, you don't get any credit with the EPA or in the environment or the Department of Interior. You don't get any credit if they want to take over primacy. So the obvious thing to do is wait until you see if they take over or not, which is impeding efforts to actually do what we're supposed to do. The best way of solving this problem is what the state of Utah has proven it can do, and take primacy on this issue and move forward. And I'm proud of what the state is doing. Their DEQ is moving forward in a very productive way.
Donna McAleer, your 30-second rebuttal.
Well, it's important that we provide incentives for both individuals and companies. And right now, one incentive that is serving to not incent people is the solar tax that Rocky Mountain Power is trying to get passed to put on people who are actually making choices about clean energy. We also need to give businesses that are moving in the clean energy front and green tech tax incentives. So it's important. Government has a very important role. That's why the Clean Air Act was passed. So we do need strict regulation.
Representative Bishop, rebuttal opportunity.
Yeah, I'll simply come in here that the issue is not do we need healthy air or not. That's a kind of premise that we started. And we've kind of gone a little bit astray from that at the same time with our discussion. The issue is who is best qualified to provide that. The EPA does not have a great record on actually being productive when they've taken primacy. The state of Utah is doing a very good job, and they should be rewarded and allowed to go forward with it. This is the level where you can actually get the best quality at the state level.
We have reached the end of our allotted time for questions with the candidates. In a perfect world, we would move to 1-minute closing statements, but we've run a little over time, so closing statements will be 45 seconds in length. Prior to airtime, it was determined Donna McAleer would have the first 45-second opportunity.
Big challenge. Today's Congress has demonstrated it's part of the problem. I'm campaigning to be part of the solution. Tomorrow's Congress that will end gridlock that has plagued Washington and continues to delay decisions that affect all of us. At 17, I learned it's the mission that matters, and Congress has lost focus on its mission, governing our country and delivering results. Utah pioneers took pride for the common good, and inspired by this pioneer spirit, finding common ground and delivering results, I'm Donna McAleer, and it's time we get our country back on track. That's a track that's not left, not right, but one that blazes forward towards a stronger, brighter future for Utah and the United States of America.
And our final 45-second opportunity to Representative Rob Bishop.
Thank you. You know, when I first went to Washington, I made one promise that I would be myself, a Utah conservative who shares your values and your dreams. And I've appreciated the opportunity of going back and do that. Speaker Pelosi, Harry Reid, they have a very different vision of what government should be compared to those here in Utah. And I'm proud to be one of the voices standing up for the principles that we have here in Utah. And I'm looking forward very much to going back there and trying to bring people together to solve the issues of lands in eastern Utah so that Utahns actually have a say, to make sure that we protect Hill Air Force Base into the future, and actually to fight for federalism. Our founding fathers gave us that specific system of government for a reason. It's the best way to solve problems, and I think it can be the salvation of this country. I've appreciated your support in the past. I'm asking for it again.
I'd like to ask this audience on hand to join me in thanking Representative Rob Bishop and Donna McAleer for their time this evening. I would be remiss if I didn't extend special appreciation to Dr. Charles White, the faculty, staff, and students of one great American college, Weber State University in Ogden, Utah. The purple tie says, "Go Wildcats." The Utah Debate Commission reminds you the next debate is Thursday, September 25th at 6 o'clock, featuring candidates from Utah's 2nd Congressional District. If you would like to attend that event at Southern Utah University or have a question you would like to submit for consideration, remember to visit the Utah Debate Commission website, utahdebatecommission.org. Providing a venue and delivery system for public debate is an important contribution to the process of informing voters. But the most important voice in any election and the most important action on shaping national direction is reserved not to a political candidate, but to you, the voter. On November 4th, raise your voice through your action of voting for the candidates of your choice. In Ogden, I'm Ken Verdoya. Good evening.